Hebrews chapter 4 tells us the Word of God is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword. I'm Pastor Bob Gray. I pastor the Emmanuel Baptist Church. Thank you for taking the time to come visit our YouTube channel. The Word of God is preeminent here at church, and we pray that every time the Bible's opened, every time the Word of God is spoken, that lives are changed. Thank you again for being here. Enjoy the services, and if I can do anything for you, my number's at the bottom of the screen. I would love to hear from you. Now, let's get right to the preaching of God's Word.
I'm preaching tonight and speaking tonight, and I want you to keep your Bibles because we're going to be going to a lot of Scripture. But I'm teaching tonight on tithing as taught in the Bible. Now, if you would, you should be in Genesis, and if you'll hold your place there, and I'm going to put some things on the screen. The past 3-4 weeks have been a journey for your pastor. I have gone back and I have tore the Scriptures completely apart. When it comes to how am I to look at this? I think one of the reasons that has driven me to this is if you'll notice in the bulletin that the tithes and offerings have been down. I think God has allowed, not approved, but I think He's allowed it to be that way so that your pastor could go all the way back and do what pastors do. And that is coming out of prayer, in prayer, and just say, God, how am I even to look at this? And so the biblical truth of the giving of tithes and offerings has been often misunderstood and often badly articulated. Sometimes we look at the giving of tithes and offerings, and I think that a lot of times we need to come to just a basis, if you will. There are several forms of the word found in the Bible. Tithes is found 13 verses and 14 times. The word tithe is found in 21 verses with 24 times. And the word tithing is found in 1 verse 2 times. So the only way to look at this is to travel all the way back to the very first time that this is mentioned. And would you look in Genesis chapter 14 is where we're at, and I'm going to read. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him. And if you'll put up the first one, gentlemen, in the booth, I'm going to utilize the screens tonight. So the first place that is found at is in Genesis 14. Look at verse 17 through verse 24. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer of the kings that were with him at the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's dale. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. Go ahead and click to the next one. This is a story of Abram and Melchizedek. So I want you to look at this. Melchizedek being a type of Christ. And he said, Blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And verse number 20, back up to verse number 19. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram, the Most High God, of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, the reason Abram went to war was to rescue Lot out. So kind of get it in your mind, if you would. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, give me the persons and take the goods to thyself. So he had rescued all these people, and the king of Sodom is saying, look, you keep the goods, just give me back the people. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up my hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from thee a thread, even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is in thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich. save only that which the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men which went with me, Aner, Eshcol, Mamre, let them take their portion. So here you have the very first time is about this relationship between Abram, before his name was changed to Abraham, and Melchizedek. Tithing started out to where there was a recognition of how good God had been. The possessor of all had been so good to Abram that Abram said, I'm going to tithe off of this blessing. And then I find it very interesting, and pray for Pastor right now, and I usually don't make that request at the middle of a sermon, but I'm trying to lay a foundation here, and I don't want to misspeak because I don't want to disappoint the Lord. But here you have someone that said, the king of Sodom said, let me give you. Let me, the king on this earth, give you. And Abram said this, I don't want anything you have. I don't even want a shoe latchet, because at the end of this journey, I only want one person to get credit for making me rich. And that's the King of Glory. This was this relationship that Abram shared with the priest of the Most High God, which represents Christ. Now, if you would go to Hebrews, this is the first time that it is mentioned. And if you would go to the book of Hebrews, here is the last time that tithe, go ahead and hit that, guys. This is the last time that tithing, click 2 more times if you will. So this is the last time that the word tithing is mentioned in the Bible. But you'll notice that the first time tithes and offerings are mentioned, and the last time tithes and offerings are mentioned, it has to deal with the same subject. So now you have 2 bookends. So I want you to imagine a bookshelf to where you put all the subject of tithing on a bookshelf. What are those 2 bookends? First time it was mentioned, sorry, you're reading left or right. The first time it was mentioned was in Genesis. The last time it's mentioned is in the book of Hebrews, chapter 7, verse 1. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham, returning from the slaughter of the kings, and what, please? Blessed him. Look at verse 2. To whom also Abraham gave a 10th part of all, first being by interpretation king of righteousness, and after that also king of Salem, which is king of peace, without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of days, but was made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. So now we know that Melchizedek in the Old Testament was and is a type of Christ. No father, no mother, no beginning, no ending. And he was made unto like the Son, the Most High. Verse 4. Now consider how great this man was, talking about Melchizedek, whom even the patriarch Abraham gave the 10th of the spoils. And verily, they that are of the sons of Levi, and please just listen to what the word says. And verily, they that are of the sons of Levi, who receive the office of the priesthood, have a commandment to take tithes of the people according to the law. That is, of their brethren, though they came out of the loins of Abraham. Now, I find this very interesting that when I got to this point, and I had now studied everything that could do with tithes. I started out with Abram and Melchizedek, and then I studied everything. But when I came to that one phrase in verse number 5, that the office of priesthood having a commandment to take tithes of the people according to the law. I stopped right there, and it was like a light came on. I know I'm not your priest. I have told you, and I have preached it, and I believe it, that there is a misconception about the office of a pastor in the average Baptist church. Pastors think they are the Old Testament priest. There's only one priest in your life, and that's your Savior. I'm not a priest. When I read that about, excuse me, that the priests in the Old Testament have a commandment to take tithes of the people according to the law, Then I went back and looked up everything that had to do with tithing, and I'm going to put them on the screen right now. And all the scriptures, and they may be difficult to see, but from Leviticus 27, verse 30, Leviticus 27:31, Leviticus 27:32, Numbers 18:24, Numbers 18:26, Numbers 18:28, Deuteronomy 12:6, Deuteronomy 12:11, Deuteronomy 12:17, Deuteronomy 14:22, Deuteronomy 14:23, Deuteronomy 14:28, Deuteronomy 26:12, 2 Chronicles 31:5, 2 Chronicles 31:6, 2 Chronicles 31:12, Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 37, verse 38, Nehemiah 12:44, Nehemiah 13:5, Nehemiah 13:12, Amos 4:4, Malachi 3:8, Malachi 3:10, Matthew 23:23, Luke 11:42, Luke 18:12. These are all the references to tithing that was under the law. There is a burden that a pastor carries that is no longer my burden. I was set free because I'm not your priest. And everything that I just went through are verses about the law concerning tithing. There's some trivia in here that was under the law. Like you were to tithe off the land and the fruit trees. Leviticus 27:30. Leviticus 27:31. Did you know that you could redeem your tithes temporarily? If all of a sudden you needed your tithe, Leviticus 27:31 says you could redeem your tithes temporarily. But then you had to pay a late fee of 20% for using God's money to finance your world. I'm going to let that settle in because that's shocking. But who would, never mind. Leviticus 27:32, you're to tithe off the herd or the flock. Deuteronomy 14:22, you're to tithe off the increase. Deuteronomy 26:12, the tithing was done every 3 years. Numbers 10:37, anything the land produced, 10% of that belonged to the Lord. Numbers 10:38, the house of God was where the tithe was to be taken. Malachi 3:8, man can rob God by not giving the tithe. Matthew 3:10, the tithe is to be brought to the storehouse. Matthew 23:23, tithing is not the weightier matter of the law. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we sit here, and it's always been the age-old argument in churches. And here it is. What relation does tithing have to the law that is fulfilled? Some say tithing is not applicable because it was instituted under the law. That's not true. Excuse me, it is true. Tithing was instituted under the law, but it did not begin under the law. Tithing existed before the law was ever given. The difference is that once the law came, then tithing was compulsory. Tithing was taken by the priest. And it dawned on me from Hebrews that I'm not a priest. And I was set free by living and dying with the tithing and or the lack thereof. So what happens to us then with this thing called tithing? Now let me stop and just say this. Y'all fundamental independent Baptists, breathe deep. Because I feel like I just sucked the air out of this auditorium. If you put up the next slide, everything those verses, outside of the 2 bookend verses, is tithing under the law. So then what good is this law? What good is this law that has been fulfilled by Christ? Would you travel to 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse number 7? Please do not think that the law was a waste of God's time. It was not a waste of God's time. The law will give you how God thinks on any subject. If you want to know how God thinks, just go back and look at what the law says. But Christ came to redeem us from the law. Now, whenever a pastor says that, and let me tell you something, I stand here in fear and trembling. I stand here having crossed over in a lot of areas to where now I'm living by faith. I had to cross. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse number 7, and if you would look there, and please listen to my words. The Apostle Paul uses two instances from the Levitical law as examples. So he goes back to the law and he says, I'm going to use an example from the law concerning the church and its giving. And so he says this. You'll find that 1 Corinthians 9 verse 7, who goeth to warfare any time at his own charges? Who planteth a vineyard and eateth not of the fruit thereof? Or who feedeth the flock and eateth not of the milk of the flock? And please don't check out anytime soon. Say I these things as a man, or saith not the law the same also? For it is written in the law of Moses. Right there, would you write down Deuteronomy chapter 25 and verse number 4. So it is written in the law of Moses, thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn. Doth God take care for oxen? Or saith he altogether for our sake? For our sake, no doubt, this is written, that he that ploweth should plow in hope, that he that thresheth in hope should be a partaker of his hope. Now he's getting ready to say we. Please know what I'm about to tell you. There was only one church that communicated with Paul on his journey, and that was the church at Philippi. So he now is not speaking for self-gratification or self. He now is coming to the churches at Corinth, and he's saying this, I need to speak to you on behalf of those that labor among you and on behalf of the ministry that you're a part of. He said, or saith he altogether, verse 10, for our sakes, no doubt this is written, that he that ploweth should plow in hope, and he that thresheth in hope should be partaker of his hope. Then he says this, if we, speaking on behalf of those of the church, if we have sown unto you spiritual things, is it a great thing if we shall reap your carnal things? What he's saying is that the church is giving you and making sure that you have a spiritual menu to draw from. He says it's really not a great thing if now you take the carnal things. Doesn't mean worldly. It means what you have been blessed with. And these carnal things then are turned around and they are given to the church so that the church can now tread out the corn. They can get more done with the gospel. Boy, it's quiet. Y'all are making me nervous by being quiet. Look what it says in verse 11. If we have sown unto you spiritual things, is it a great thing if we shall reap you carnal things? Would you please look at this? If others be partaker of this power over you. What power? The power to take some of your carnal things. We readily step into agreements and give people power over our carnal. This is what Paul is saying. Kelly and I lived in the same house for 27 years. And here about 2 or 3 years ago, God made it possible for us to move. And when we moved, I, like everybody else, you sell the house, you take the equity out of this house, and then you go down and you try to secure a loan. And one of the men in our church is a loan officer, so I went down and sat down with him, and he looked at me and he said, Pastor, here are the particulars. Here's everything. When we were completely done, Kelly and I went and signed the closing papers. I have given the bank power to reap my carnal things, and I asked the bank, would you give me a lump of money, and I will give you back a monthly payment? And the bank was so gracious to me that they gave me a lump of money, but guess what? I have given them power over my carnal things so that I might have a place to live. Vehicles. When you go to get a vehicle and you have to finance that vehicle, what you're saying to the people is, I want you. I want the privilege of having a vehicle, so I'm going to give you power over my finances. So if others be partaker of this power over you, are not we rather? Look at the beautiful thing in this verse. If we give other people the power to take our carnal so that we can enjoy a house, and we give other people the power to take our carnal so that we can enjoy a vehicle, then why wouldn't you give God that kind of power to take some of your carnal? But would you look, your pastor was like walking out of chains. I've crossed over to living by faith. Because look at the next verse, which if I could use, it took me and turned me upside down. Look what it said there. Nevertheless, we have not used this power. I need to apologize to several people. Because up until this past couple of weeks, your pastor in the area of tithing has totally thought I was a priest that was commanded to take the tithe. When I was made aware of these verses, I thought to myself, dear God, please know this. If I preach this to God's people, they ain't never going to give again. You know what the average independent Baptist preacher thinks? Don't empower the sheep. I cannot tell you that church work is second nature to me. But I get tired of pastors saying, well, you know, them church members are dumb sheep. I don't deal well with that kind of stuff. And it's just us church family here tonight. There are times I've gotten back in my car and showed up back at the house. I'm not doing this kind of stuff because God's people are not dumb, ignorant sheep. You got God living on the inside. You're a smart individual. I am not a priest to where I have to come take the tithe, but then I'm reading this and saying, dear Heavenly Father, they get it when they get a payment book that I've given you power. They get it. They get it. But they have the power to repossess their car. They have the power to go kick them out of their home. If I right now told the loan officer that's in our church and I called him and said, hey, brother, I ain't paying no more of this loan. Come get me. Is there any doubt in you people's mind that it would start going through the necessary channels? Then the sheriff would show up at my house with an eviction notice. You know what the verse is saying? Paul said, I haven't used this power. Then look at the next phrase. But suffer all things. Would you please go to Philippians? And hold your place there and go to the book of Philippians. So many verses right now make so much sense to me. In the book of Philippians chapter 4, and I appreciate your attentiveness, and so many things right now are just like, Look at Philippians chapter 4 and verse number 10. This is Paul. But I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at the last your care of me hath flourished again, wherein ye were also careful, but ye lacked opportunity. Basically what it said was the church at Philippi was, in fact, drop to verse 15. Now you Philippians know also that in the beginning of the gospel, when I departed from Macedonia, no church communicated with me as concerning giving and receiving, but ye only. For even in Thessalonica, ye sent once and again unto my necessity. What he was saying was, my sole sustenance came from you, the church. But that verse back up there that says, verse 10, but ye lacked opportunity. What that means is they had gathered it, but they couldn't get it to Paul. There was no DHL, there was no UPS, you couldn't overnight it. Look at verse 11, Paul's attitude. Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. I know both how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. What he was saying was, I don't have the resources to continue, but I'm going to continue. Because Christ is the one that gives me strength, not the care package I receive in the mail. Go back to 1 Corinthians. He said, if others be partakers of this power over you, are not we rather? Nevertheless, we have not used this power, but suffer all things, lest we should hinder the gospel of Christ. Do you know how many preachers leave churches when the offerings start tanking? Because they're hirelings. They are not preachers who recognize the gospel has to keep going. And if there's no money, that has no bearing on my calling. You have to step in. You have to keep going. So when people are like, you know, what is the law then? So if tithing is under the law, and Pastor, I think what you're telling me is that now we're not under the law, so does this mean that I can do anything? Well, understand that we are not under the law, but the law serves as an example. And when Paul was talking to the New Testament church about the financing of the New Testament church, he said, let me refer back to the law as an example. The Holy Spirit, through Paul, uses the law as an example for the New Testament church and Christian to follow. The law is relevant as an example, although it is no longer legislated. That hurt. You pastors know exactly what I'm talking about. That hurt. Paul draws this conclusion while pointing back to the priesthood and looking at the temple. The ministry cares for the spiritual needs of the people. We have sown unto you spiritual things. The people then care for the physical needs of the ministry. Is it a great thing if we shall reap your carnal things? I'm coming to you tonight letting you know that tithing in the Bible, that when Christ fulfilled the law, now would you go with me to Galatians? I want you to look at Galatians chapter 3. There are two people involved in the two bookend stories concerning tithes and offerings, and it is Abraham and Melchizedek. So now we know that Hebrews 7:5 says this, and verily, they that are of the sons of Levi receive the office of the priesthood and have a commandment to take the tithes of the people according to the law. That is, of their brethren, though they come out of the loins of Abraham. Every time you are referred to, I am referred to with our salvation. We never become the sons of Moses. Please, we are not in the lineage of Moses. Look at Galatians chapter 3 and verse 6. Even as who, please? Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. Please look at your standing. Know ye therefore that they which are of faith in the same are the children of who? Abraham. The children of Moses and the law? No. God told you and I that the day that I got saved, Christ paid it all. And he made me one of the lineage of Abraham. Look at verse 8. And the scripture foreseeing that God would justify the heathen, that's me, through faith, preached before the gospel unto who? Abraham, saying, in thee shall all nations be blessed. So then they which be of faith are blessed with who? Faithful Abraham. That the blessings of Abraham might come on the Gentiles, that's me, through who? Jesus Christ, that we might receive the promise of the Spirit through faith. Now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. What promises? What are these promises? Would you pause right there and, well, let me finish reading. So it talks about these promises. Verse 18. Verse 16, I'm sorry, Galatians 3:16. Now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. I kind of jumped 9:14. That's why y'all looking at me. I'm barreling through it. Verse number 9. So then they which be of faith are blessed with faithful Abraham. Look at verse 14. That the blessings of Abraham might come on the Gentiles through Jesus Christ. Look at verse number 16. Now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He saith not, and to seeds as of many, but as of one, and to thy seed, which is Christ. Verse 18. For if the inheritance be of the law, it is no more of what? Promise. But God gave it to Moses through the law. That is not what that says. But God gave it to who? Abraham. And look at verse 29. And if ye be Christ, then are ye Abraham's seed, and heirs according to the what? Promise. What are these promises? Would you go all the way back to Genesis chapter 12? What are these promises? Look at Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. Now the Lord had said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great, what please? And I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Could I ask you a personal question? How many have unexplained lucky breaks that have come your way? How many can look back at your life and say, how did we get that? How did that ever happen to me? Where other people are fighting and to scratching to get? How do you walk through a pie fight and not get hit? How do you go through a recession and still make? How did you get that promotion? How did you get that job? How? By keeping the law? No. by going all the way back to Abraham. Go to Galatians chapter 3 and verse number 10. You think I was nervous before to read some verses to you. Right now, I'm nervous. It's like the guy that stands up after the preacher's been preaching for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, and he quotes that verse, "Let my people go." Look at Galatians chapter 3. And I want you to read this in context of the law. For as many as are of the works of the law are under the what? For it is written, "Cursed is everyone that continueth not in all things which are written in the book of the law to do them. But that no man is justified by the law in the sight of God. It is evident, for the just shall live by" what? Faith. And the law is not of faith, but the man that doeth them shall live in them. Look at verse 13. Christ hath redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. Malachi chapter 3 says that there's a curse that comes from not tithing. Ladies and gentlemen, Christ took that curse and every other curse for you and I. And I think for a long time we have tithed out of fear. You know how good your God is? Don't pay him another dime, and he'll never kick you out of your home. He'll never take away your car. Why? And when you look at the law, please know this, that every time you violate the law, and by the way, this is one of a lot of subjects that are found in the law. Now, about this time, independent Baptists are going, "Are you serious? Are we getting ready to go liberal? Only if you want to." But I don't want to. That law is the mind of God. It is how God thinks. But God sent his Son to take the curse away. For everything that you and we don't obey all the law. Are you serious? But Christ took the curse. You say, then what's the consequence, Pastor, of not tithing? No blessings. You see, you look around, they're lucky. Why does it always break for them? Because they have that relationship like Abraham with Melchizedek that says this, if I'm rich, nobody on this earth made me rich. You made me rich. And I've been so blessed by you that I would like to give back to you a little bit of that blessing. When I write that tithe check and I go to drop it in that box, for the very first time, I now did it without a fear. I did it with faith. Going, my Savior paid it all. Why did he take the curse? Would you look at the next verse? That the blessing of Abraham, here we go again, that the blessing of Abraham might come on the Gentiles through Jesus Christ. You see, if you'll go to Hebrews as we end, And then I'll tell you what this means. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, Hebrews 7:1, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a 10th part of all. First being by interpretation king of righteousness, and after that also king of Salem, which is king of peace, without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. Now consider how great this man was, unto whom even the patriarch Abraham gave the 10th of his spoils. Tithing is what people do when they recognize how great he is. Tithing is what people do when they recognize how great he is. Out soul winning this afternoon, my partner and I were talking about, how did you get all this? How did you get here? You weren't here a year ago, and you weren't here a year and a half ago. And he said about 4 years ago, I woke up and realized I need to tithe. Ladies and gentlemen, tithing is just a little part of the total acknowledgement. You're great. You're great. And if any believer says, then why even read the Old Testament? To find out how he feels and to say thank you for how great you are. We squabble over the dumbest things. We get into these petty black and white issues that all of a sudden we don't even get it. God, you're a great God. You say, Pastor, so if I decide to stop tithing, one, I'm done worrying about it. Two, the money is not why we do what we do. The bank was very clear. What's your game plan? Simple. If that money starts dipping, we start shutting down buildings. And if that money starts dipping, then for 4.5 years when I became youth pastor, I worked 3 jobs. But y'all, I'm not living there. I'm living by faith that our God has blessed us. And if you're not tithing, then would you please recognize how great he is and stop using his blessing without recognizing how great he is. I'm a firm believer that I'm looking at the blessings. Y'all have been blessed. I have been blessed. Would you please, I said it was the last scripture. I lied, but we're right on time. Lying in the pulpit. Go to Galatians chapter 5 and verse number 1. When Christ redeemed us from the law, if we can walk in love as Abraham did. Abraham was called a friend of God. And I think when you and I fall in love with God, what I preached this morning, I truly believe when we live close to the cross, then we no longer are doing life by constraint, compulsory. We are living life in recognition. He's great. He's a great God. Why would I not be holy? He's a great God. Why would I not walk circumspectly? He's a great God. Why would I want to associate with the things that put him on the cross? So there's a liberty when you get saved. But there's also a warning that comes with that liberty. Look at Galatians 5:1. Stand fast in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us what, please? Free. And be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Look at verse number 13, if you will. For brethren, ye have been called unto liberty. Only use not liberty for the occasion of the flesh. And if anybody's listening to me right now that you're like, oh, so if the only consequence is no blessing, so like that's the only consequence. Like no blessing. My friend, don't scoff at the blessings of God. Because the blessings of God, He is a buckler and a shield that steps right out in front, and you get the job, and you get the breaks, and all of a sudden things start happening. How do you explain this? Brother man, I'm thinking about you on the evangelism trail. How do you explain your life? Rich uncle? They're all dead. Thank you. How do you explain that? There's a single young man in our church. When he told me how much he was making an hour, how do you explain this? The blessings of God. And the blessings are blessings that God wants to bring your way. You teenagers right now, that you're like, boy, I hope I get the breaks in life. Nobody gets breaks in life, but there are people who have the blessings of God on their life. And the blessings will put you at the right place. The blessings will put you at the right person. The blessings will put you where you need to be. And the Bible's very clear, they that curse you will be cursed. And there's something about honoring the Lord. My tithe and my offering is only a part of how I honor the Lord. But boy, it was reassuring to me that God, I don't have to worry about who is tithing and who is not tithing. Because who's the biggest giver in this church? God. God's the biggest giver. All these stories. See that jar of gallbladders? That's their tithes and offerings. Nope, Christ paid it all. And a lot of times we look at bad things happening. Come on now, y'all, good independent Baptists right here. Y'all can smile. Have to have that car wreck, must not be tithing. Come on now, come on. Do you know sin has a built-in depravity? Well, why did I wreck that car? Probably because you were texting and driving. Well, why did my tire go flat? Because you went to a construction site and ran over a nail. Why is all this bad happening? Probably because you slept in instead of going to work. Well, they're cutting my hours, Pastor. Because you keep calling in. Come on now. But Abraham was like this. God, what a great God you are. And I just like to honor you with everything that I have. And God said, okay, you go to that land. Start walking through that land. Why? Because God and Abraham had this relationship. I get a kick when God gives to you. I love that when somebody says, you're not going to believe what just happened. It happened just 2 days ago. One of the members was like, look what just happened. And I'm like, how much? And I found out what the price was. Like, where'd you get that at? Like, can I get the same deal? No. But I tried. But it didn't work. You want to know why? It's called the blessings of God upon their life because they honor God. We are not the children of Moses. We are the children of Abraham. And every curse was taken by Christ on the cross. And if sin does have you in bondage, it's not because he didn't pay it all. Sin has its own built-in consequence. But your God's not in heaven. He's not wanting to hammer you. Okay. Now that I've set you free, I've emancipated you. You say, Pastor, are you nervous? You have no idea. But I'll tell you this much. Whatever happens, I want my God to know about my life. You're great. And why would I play the IRS Christian to where I come down to the 5 decimal points? I'm just going to honor you with my money. I'm going to honor you with my mind. I'm going to honor you with my life. I'm going to honor you with my body. I'm going to honor you with my conversation. I'm going to honor you. I'm going to honor you. I'm going to honor you. And when I read the Bible, this is just one subject in the Bible. And God, I want to know your mind. Lord, I want to know your heart. You'll find it. And then just honor him with it. And watch if God doesn't open the blessings, not so you and I can brag, but for us to say, what a great God. First time tithing's found in the Bible is with Abram and Melchizedek. The last times with Abraham and Melchizedek. What is your tithing like? How do you look at it? Well, you going to send me an invoice? Had a member several years ago that joined, and they said, now this tithing, you going to send me an invoice? And to my detriment and my shame, he said, you know, sometimes I do check the tithing. Not anymore. Your pastor needs to walk in faith, not fear. Because God has been good to us. He's a great God. And I'm going to tell you right now, I am not a priest. I'm just a sinner saved by grace. But I want to take everything I have and I want to give it to the Lord. And the least I can do is follow in the steps of my father Abraham. I almost thought, Luke, about ending tonight with Father Abraham had many sons. But I didn't want you to be condemned for dancing in the house of God.
Thank you for spending your time with us. Whether you watched the entire sermon or you just scrubbed yourself through to different points, I do appreciate you taking the time. If I can do something for you, please let me know. And I would encourage you, keep living for the Lord Jesus Christ, keep putting him first, and tell others about him. And I promise you, you'll find that fulfillment that you're looking for. God bless you. Thank you for watching us.